What if everything you have learned about discipline and letting go only becomes truly useful when your entire system begins to move as one? Most people collect valuable insights over time. They understand why a regulated nervous system makes follow-through easier. They see how resistance multiplies suffering and how small releases create space. Yet in the middle of an ordinary difficult day, these insights often remain just out of reach. The shoulders tighten, the mind races, and old patterns return, even though the understanding is there. The missing piece is rarely more information, it is integration. When your nervous system operates in a fragmented state, different parts pull in different directions. One part wants to show up with steadiness. Another part, still carrying old protection, braces against perceived threat. A third part stays lost in mental stories about the past or future. The result is not a lack of willpower, it is a lack of internal coherence. Discipline feels effortful because the system is not yet aligned. Letting go feels difficult because the body still believes holding on is safer. True integration happens when the thinking mind, emotional responses, and bodily sensations communicate more fluidly. The nervous system stops treating wise responses as special events and begins to treat them as the natural baseline. This does not require forcing yourself into a new state. It requires creating enough safety and repetition for the whole system to reorganize around what you have already learned. Practical integration begins with noticing moments of fragmentation without judgment. When you feel scattered or reactive, pause and bring attention to the body in a simple way. Feel the contact of your feet with the ground. Notice the movement of breath. Let the nervous system register that you are here and that you are safe enough to slow down. These small returns to presence are how coherence is built. They are not dramatic, but they are powerful because they happen in real life rather than only during dedicated practice time. Over time, this creates a different quality of strength. You no longer have to push so hard to remember what you know. Your system begins to carry the wisdom for you. The practices from earlier pillars stop feeling like something you perform and start becoming part of how you naturally move through the world. This is the foundation that makes everything else more usable. This naturally leads us to look at what it actually means to move from practice into genuine embodiment in daily life. When the nervous system begins to integrate, something important shifts. The practices you have been doing stop feeling like something you perform at specific times and start becoming part of how you are in ordinary moments. There comes a point in any meaningful inner work when you realize that knowing is not the same as living. Many people reach a stage where they can explain the concepts clearly and even practice them well in ideal conditions. Yet in the middle of a real moment, the body still reacts from older patterns. What makes this gap so persistent is that practice often happens in protected conditions, while embodiment is tested in the messy middle of life. You can meditate beautifully for 20 minutes and then lose your center 5 minutes later when plans change or someone speaks sharply. The practice has not yet become the default setting of the nervous system. Embodiment is when the regulated breath, the open posture, and the choice to release rather than grip become the baseline rather than the exception. This shift cannot be forced through more effort. It occurs through repeated, gentle exposure to real-life moments while staying connected to the body. After any formal practice, deliberately carry one small quality into the next ordinary activity. If you worked with softening around tension, notice the first moment afterward when something irritates you and experiment with the same softening. If you practiced steady presence, bring that steadiness into the next conversation or task. These bridges are how the nervous system learns that the new way of being is safe and useful, even outside the practice container. The real test is not whether you can return to presence on a cushion or in a quiet room. It is whether you can return to presence when your child is upset, a deadline is approaching, or an old story begins replaying. There is a particular kind of peace that arrives when you no longer have to leave your life to find your center. The center begins traveling with you. This is why integration cannot be rushed.
The nervous system learns through repetition over time, not through intensity in a single moment. This brings us to the quiet power that lives in consistent small choices made day after day. Real change in how we show up rarely comes from dramatic resolutions or intense periods of effort. It comes from the quiet accumulation of small choices made when no one is watching. These choices may seem insignificant in any single moment, yet over months and years they reshape the nervous system and the sense of who we are. The body learns through repetition. When we consistently choose to return to the breath, to soften around irritation, or to follow through on one small promise to ourselves, the system begins to trust that these responses are available and safe. The mistake many people make is waiting for motivation or the perfect conditions before making these small choices. Motivation is unreliable. Conditions are rarely perfect. The people who build lasting integration treat the small choice as the important thing, regardless of how they feel in the moment. They show up for the 2-minute breathing practice even when they are tired. They pause and notice their grip on a situation even when they would rather push through. These acts send a clear signal to the nervous system that presence and regulation are not reserved for special occasions. Over time, this consistency creates a different kind of strength. It is not loud or visible to others. It shows up as steadiness when things go wrong, as quicker recovery after stress, and as the ability to remember what matters without having to convince yourself. The small choice protects the identity you are building more than any single large effort ever could. When you miss a day, you simply return the next day without turning it into a story about failure. The continuity matters more than perfection. This quiet strength is what makes integration feel less like something you are trying to achieve and more like something that is gradually becoming who you are. It is built in the ordinary moments, not in the dramatic ones.
The nervous system learns through repetition and safety over time, not through intensity or speed. Many people feel frustrated when integration feels slower than they expected. They have done the practices, gained insight, and still find themselves falling into old patterns during stress. This frustration often comes from an unspoken belief that change should happen quickly once we understand what to do. The body does not work that way. Ancient traditions understood this gradual nature. They spoke of cultivation rather than sudden transformation. The nervous system needs thousands of small moments of safety and new response before it reorganizes its default settings. Rushing the process usually creates more internal pressure, which the system interprets as threat. This can actually slow integration because the body tightens in response to the demand for faster progress. What makes this especially important is that integration happens in layers. First, the mind understands. Then, the body begins to experience moments of regulation. Over time, these moments become more frequent and more stable. Eventually, the new response becomes the more natural one. Each layer requires its own time. Skipping layers or forcing the pace usually leads to superficial change that does not hold when life becomes difficult. Practical patience looks like continuing the small practices even when progress feels invisible. It looks like meeting frustration with the same kindness you would offer someone else who is learning something new. It looks like trusting that the nervous system is integrating even when you cannot yet feel the full results. The work is not to make integration happen faster. The work is to keep creating the conditions for it while releasing the demand for immediate evidence. This understanding of time helps us move from head understanding into something deeper that the body can actually know and use.
There is a significant difference between understanding something intellectually and knowing it in the body. Head understanding can happen quickly. You can read about nervous system regulation, agree with the concepts, and even explain them to someone else. Body knowing develops more slowly. It is the felt sense that your system has reorganized around the new understanding. The breath naturally deepens when stress rises. The shoulders soften without you having to remind them. The impulse to grip loosens before the story fully forms. This shift from head to body happens through repeated experiences of safety while engaging with what used to trigger old patterns. Interoception, the ability to sense internal signals, improves with practice. As you become more familiar with the subtle sensations of tension and release, you gain more choice in how you respond. The body begins to carry the wisdom instead of requiring the mind to manage everything from above. Practical ways to support this movement include bringing attention to sensation during ordinary activities rather than only during formal practice. Notice the quality of your breath while speaking with someone. Feel your feet while walking between tasks. Observe where you hold tension when plans change. These moments of embodied noticing are how the nervous system updates its map of what is safe and what is possible. Over time, the understanding moves from something you think about to something you live from. This embodied knowing becomes especially valuable when life becomes difficult and old patterns are most likely to return.
Difficult moments reveal how much integration has actually taken place. When stress rises, the nervous system tends to revert to older, more protective patterns. This is not a failure, it is how the system was designed. The question is not whether you will contract, but how quickly and gently you can return to presence once the wave has passed. Staying grounded does not mean never feeling reactive or scattered. It means having enough embodied resources to notice the contraction and begin the return without turning the moment into a story about how far you still have to go. Simple practices become powerful here. A longer exhale, feeling the contact points of the body with whatever is supporting you, naming what is happening internally without needing to change it immediately. These are not techniques to make the difficulty disappear. They are ways to stay connected to yourself while the difficulty is present. The integration you have been building shows itself in these moments as a slightly shorter gap between reaction and return. The body remembers the path back more quickly because it has traveled that path many times in calmer conditions. This is why consistent small practice matters so much. It creates a well-worn route that remains accessible even when the terrain becomes rough. Over time, difficult moments become less threatening to your sense of progress because you know you have the capacity to return. The work is not to eliminate difficulty, it is to meet it with more of yourself available. This capacity to stay grounded becomes even more supported when we include relationship and community in the process.
Integration does not happen in isolation. The nervous system is social by nature. It learns regulation through co-regulation with others. Safe, attuned relationships provide the kind of external support that makes internal integration easier and faster. When someone is present with us in a grounded way, our own nervous system often settles more quickly than it can on its own. This does not mean you need perfect relationships or a large community. It means paying attention to the quality of connection in the relationships you already have. Moments of genuine presence with another person, even brief ones, can reinforce the embodied learning. They offer the nervous system experiences of safety that it can then draw upon when alone. Conversely, relationships that are consistently dysregulating can slow integration because they keep the system in a protective state. Practical ways to bring integration into relationship include bringing some of the same attention you give to your own breath and body into conversations. Notice when you begin to grip or defend. Experiment with softening slightly while still staying engaged. Offer presence to others without trying to fix them. These small choices in relationship become powerful practices because they're tested in real connection rather than in solitude. Over time, the integration you develop internally begins to support healthier relationships, and the relationships in turn support deeper integration. The two reinforce each other. This brings us to the question of how to maintain inner freedom when the outer world remains chaotic and demanding.
Inner freedom is not the absence of external pressure. It is the capacity to stay connected to yourself even when the world around you is loud, fast, or uncertain. Many people discover that as they integrate more, they also become more sensitive to how much external input they can handle without losing their center. This is not a weakness, it is useful information. Maintaining freedom requires intentional structures that protect your capacity for presence. These structures might include boundaries around how much news or social media you consume, clear transitions between work and rest, or simple daily rhythms that signal safety to the nervous system. They are not rigid rules. They are supportive conditions that make it easier to return to yourself when things feel overwhelming. The integration you have been building shows itself here as the ability to notice when you are losing ground without immediately judging yourself. You can recognize the signs of fragmentation earlier and take small actions to return. This does not eliminate the chaos of the world. It reduces how much of that chaos you absorb into your own system. Over time, this creates a different relationship with the external world. You engage with what matters without being swept away by everything. You can care deeply while still remaining grounded in your own presence. This capacity for ongoing presence points to the lifelong nature of this work.
Integration is not a project that reaches completion. It is a way of relating to yourself and to life that continues to deepen over time. There will always be new seasons, new challenges, and new layers of old patterns that become visible as you become more capable of seeing them. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is the natural rhythm of a living system. What changes over the years is not the absence of difficulty, but the quality of your relationship with difficulty. The return to presence becomes more familiar. The grip loosens more quickly. Self-compassion becomes more automatic. These shifts happen gradually, often without dramatic markers, until one day you notice that you are living with a different baseline than you once had. The lifelong nature of the work invites a particular kind of humility and patience. You stop measuring progress by how quickly you can eliminate old patterns and start measuring it by how kindly and steadily you meet whatever is here. The practices remain useful, but they become less like tools you apply and more like ways of being that you naturally return to. This perspective protects against both discouragement and spiritual pride. It keeps the work alive and honest across decades rather than turning it into something you eventually finish. This brings us to the heart of the entire journey.
After all the practices, all the insights, and all the gradual integration, what remains is surprisingly simple. You come home to yourself, not as a final achievement, but as a quiet recognition that you have been here all along, underneath the gripping, the resistance, and the effort to become someone different. The work of discipline, letting go, and embodiment ultimately serves this return. Coming home does not mean everything is comfortable or resolved. It means you can be present with whatever is here without needing to leave yourself in order to handle it. The open hand and the steady heart become your more natural way of meeting life. You still care deeply. You still act when action is needed, but you no longer abandon yourself in the process. This homecoming is not something you arrive at once and for all. It is something you practice returning to, again and again, in small and large moments. Each return strengthens the pathway. Each return makes the next one slightly easier. Over time, the returns become less like something you have to remember and more like something your system knows how to do. The heart of the journey is not the techniques or the understanding. It is this ongoing, gentle relationship with yourself. It is the freedom to be present with your own life as it actually is, while still moving toward what matters. This is the integration that all the previous pillars have been pointing toward. It is quiet, steady, and deeply human, and it is available moment by moment as you continue to come home.